Welcome to the CanInnovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. This episode is quite the game changer. It's actually quite the eye-opener because I get to sit down and talk to Sheena Brady, who is the CEO and founder of Tease Teas. Just to let you know, Tease Teas is phenomenal. Just check out their website and, the flavors, the combinations, the whole experience, it just gets you kind of really super excited. However, we talk about so many things. Like, first of all, did you know that Tea Sommelier is a thing? Yep. A thing, a real thing. It's amazing. I couldn't get over it. So we talk about this, how she got into Tease Teas, how she brought it up, her unique business model. Like, it's in 30 plus countries. It's pretty a big deal. And she's done this in a very short amount of time. So there's tons we can learn from her. But what we got really down and talked about was her entrepreneurial challenges and how she's always giving back. So she's actually even founded a Tease Founders Fund, which is a $20,000 grant that you don't need to pay back. And that was inspired by all the painful challenges that she had growing in her business. So, from cash flow issues that we hear all the time from all the innovators that have been on the podcast before, we hear about how it's very difficult to navigate through the government websites to figure out what grants and credits that you can actually, get to and everything else. So this Founders Fund is amazing because, one, it's not just about the $20,000 grant. It is that you're also going to get mentorship and actually talk to people that have been there and done that. And anyone that's an entrepreneur out there or an innovator out there, it's a very lonely road and it's a confusing road and it's so hard to learn about all these things. And of course, I had to find out what her favorite tea was, being that she's a tea sommelier. You got to learn from the best, right? I hope you enjoy this episode because I definitely learned a lot. So I'm pretty stoked about this episode, and honestly, for a couple of reasons. One, Sheena Brady is truly an inspiration, and I've been kind of stalking her for a little while. But second of all, this is actually a guest recommendation from Adrian Selmavec. And if you don't know him, you got to check out that episode we had. But he's the guy that came out with that book with the free PR with Cameron as well, and it's how to get chased by the press without hiring a PR firm. It is such an amazing episode, such a great book. I think it's one of my favorite little tools that I have at my desk. So this is pretty exciting. So another innovator, recommending another innovator. So we've got Sheena Brady in the house, and honestly, I'm super excited.
Oh, thank you. I'm just as excited. Thank you so much for having me. And it's actually an honor to have Adrian share the recommendation in the first place because he's been on the sidelines as a mentor of mine since our beginning days of Tease Tea. And so I've just chased him over the years, asking for his advice and everything. And it's just really cool to kind of be at the level with our company where Adrian feels confident to share us as a referral.
It's huge. It's amazing. He knows how to attract the smartest people. Like, he's got the right connections. That's for sure.
Definitely.
I was thrown for a loop about this whole Tease Tea because, first of all, my friend Chris is going to go crazy about your company because she's a total tea junkie. But I had no idea you could be a tea sommelier.
Yeah, I actually have to explain to people. Every time I say I'm a tea sommelier, I always have this sideline. It's a real thing, I swear. And so basically, would you like me to go into what that even means?
Sure. I am fascinated.
Yeah. So in short, I spent a decade in hospitality. That was what was supposed to be my forever career. That's what I went to school for. It was my dream to open a restaurant. And so I spent 10 years really trying to get closer to that journey. And that journey led me to work in some really cool cities like New York and San Francisco. Finally, ended up in Toronto, and I was a service leader and professional wine sommelier throughout that career. And so I was very excited to get my hands on the wine menu at this beautiful hotel. And the general manager of the hotel said, we actually have a master sommelier in training, but we want you to do our tea program. And so it felt a little bit belittling in the moment, to be honest, because first of all, I didn't even drink tea. I was surviving on 7 or 8 cappuccinos just to get me through a shift. I wanted to prove him that I was capable, and especially because I was new into the role. So I said, what do you want me to do? Add some Liptons and Red Rose and call it a day and I can move on? And then he said, no. Actually, the hotel is called the Shangri-La. And if anyone's not familiar with the Shangri-La, it is basically like the Four Seasons of Asia, in terms of like its luxury brand. And so it now has 2 properties here in Canada. So he says, I don't want Lipton's and Red Rose. I want the biggest tea program in all of Toronto. And in addition to that, I want you to be able to teach our team how to deliver tea ceremonies from different cultures from around the world. And also, in addition to that, I want a minimum of 75 different teas on this menu. It needs to be a tea library, not a tea menu. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. And I knew that if I was going to, walk the walk, I needed to get educated about tea. Because again, I didn't even drink tea. So I found the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada. They're an incredible organization that represents the entire tea industry from bush to cup. And they had a Tea Sommelier program. So it was an 8-month journey for me, and what was really fascinating that I didn't expect when we talk about nerding out on wine, for example, is that my passion for wine completely translated to tea unexpectedly. So, with wine, you have grapes and you have red grapes, white grapes, and then hundreds of different varietals. With tea, it's the exact same thing. A lot of people don't know that all tea comes from the same plant, and the difference is how it's harvested, the way it's processed, the geography. It all affects that final product. So it's a very unexpected but natural shift, and I became a tea sommelier.
It's amazing. I had no clue there was such a thing, and it's just fascinating to me. And I didn't even know that there was, you said different tea ceremonies from around the world. Mm-hmm. Is there that many different types of tea ceremonies around the world? I thought the British had the tea down pat.
Yeah, so there are tea ceremonies, and then there are simply ways that cultures enjoy tea. And so if a guest came to this, worldly hotel and said, I would like a Japanese tea ceremony, or I would like a Chinese tea ceremony, or I would like to enjoy tea the way they do in Russia, or the way they do in England, or the way they do in Morocco, like we needed to be able to perform as such. And so a Japanese tea ceremony, for example, on the short end takes about 10 minutes to perform.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Good.
It's a legit thing. It's quite a process.
I had no idea what an art this was. This is brilliant. So I was reading about you that in 5 short years, you have built Tease Tea as a solopreneur side hustle out of your condo to $1 million business empowering tea lovers in 30 plus countries.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. So when I started as a side hustle, I knew that a key differentiator was going to be important because let's face it, there's nothing super special or unique about tea. We have tea stores in every shopping mall. Tea is served in pretty much every cafe. So what was going to make us different? I decided to combine passion and purpose through entrepreneurship. So passion being tea, it was my creative outlet, just, having fun blending teas out of my condo in Toronto. But the purpose part was really important. And so for me, just having this is probably not to get into like a Dr. Phil episode, but I faced some pretty dynamic challenges growing up and through early adulthood. And so I felt like I didn't have the best support system to succeed. I think if you look at statistics, I probably should have been in those statistics of people who have faced barriers and don't really get to overcome them in the most positive way. So I wanted to be a part of helping create a better support system for others. And that's where the Empowering Women piece came. So with tea, I decided, we were going to make this special. With every single piece of content we produce, whether it's, through social media, our blogs, our newsletters, it's going to be about empowering women. And we want our customers to feel like they can be self-empowered by the tea choices they choose to complement their goals. And in addition to that, they're also a part of empowering women around the world because a portion from their order will support organizations dedicated to women's empowerment. And so that was our key differentiator from day one. And when we talk about innovation, I think that people sometimes kind of think of like technology as innovation, but for us, it was just being a social enterprise before even knowing what that was. Just feeling like we had an obligation, as a company to be able to give back early on, even in our early days when we weren't making a lot of money. It's never too early or too late to start giving back. So that's a key part of what we do.
Because you've got the Tease Tea charity program that you've got going on. So a portion of the proceeds go to actually these types of organizations to empower women. That's a really crazy. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, to date, we've been able to contribute over $30,000 in financial and product support to these organizations. So we're really proud of that. And we have really kind of we've supported a number of organizations over the years, but we decided to get more granular in 2019 about our charity program. And we decided to identify what our core values were as a company and choose programs reflective of that for our charity program, so we could create more meaningful relationships with these orgs. So with that, our three pillars, and very quickly, are empowering young girls through education. So we work with Plan International, Because I Am a Girl, with their program for that. And so we're proud to be able to say at the end of 2019, we'll be able to have sent X number of girls to schools in developing countries, depending on what our numbers look like at the end of the year. In addition to that, the second pillar would be empowering gender balance and equality, because that's where it starts when we talk about empowerment is really equality at the end of the day. So again, sponsoring programs through Women for Women org, another international company that has programs to help support gender balance. And then the third one is actually a program that we created at Tease Tea called our Tease Tea Founders Fund. And that's our third pillar of empowering women through entrepreneurship. It's obviously a topic I'm very passionate about as a women entrepreneur myself, of course.
No, this is amazing. I was kind of curious. I was going to ask you a little bit more about this Tease Tea Founders Fund, because I was like, what is this? Because it sounded like it's an incubator process, but I wasn't sure. I would love to hear more about this.
Yeah, so as a female entrepreneur, I face some pretty interesting, unique funding challenges, throughout my entrepreneurial journey. Despite having a profitable company since year 2, despite having purchase orders, despite having, what I would think is pretty impressive growth year after year, I've fired my bank, I don't know how many times, or wanted to fire them at least. Because they were incredibly unhelpful. A fun fact, we generated our first $500,000 in revenue with a $1,000 credit card limit. So you can only imagine the juggling that took. I've had to take out what I call loans from glorified loan sharks at 21% interest rates with daily repayments. I've had to drain my mortgage, down payment for a mortgage, not once, but twice, and the second time while pregnant. And so, I've felt that I've had to not only risk my company's financial security, but my own personal security just to scale my business accordingly. And that's not okay. I don't think we should have to do that. We already have so many risks as entrepreneurs. We shouldn't have to compromise our basic safeties, like that bottom row of what Maslow's, theory is, or whatever, of having our needs met. And so, in speaking to other women, I learned that my unique challenges were actually far from unique. And the stories that I heard woman to woman going through funding challenges were really a huge problem. And I wanted to be at least a small part of the solution. So I created the Tease Tea Founders Fund. And basically, in a nutshell, it's bringing other successful entrepreneurs together and challenging them and saying, okay, now that you've reached this certain level of success, what are you doing to help pay it forward to the next generation of budding successful entrepreneurs, and getting them to walk the walk? And then same thing with mentors, challenging them, because, I would like to think that most successful entrepreneurs are where they are today because of mentorship and support that they were able to access over the years. So doing the same thing with mentors. And so I'm really proud to say that we have generated over $20,000 in funding. It's non-repayable, so there's no interest loan. I'm not taking equity, nothing like that. It's really a grant, I guess, for lack of better words. And then in addition to that, bigger than the funding, every single applicant will have access to mentorship, even if they don't make it as a finalist to receive the funding. So even if we get 100 people apply, we are going to make sure that if they want mentorship, they will have access to that. And then our 2 finalists will receive up to $20,000 in funding for their venture.
And they don't have to pay back, no equity, no purely a grant.
Purely a grant, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. Because
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, and there's accountability piece there too, right? We don't just want to say here's money and have a nice day. The mentorship part is huge. We're going to expect that the finalists are a part of the mentorship process. And then we are going to be releasing 50% of the funding up front, and then 50% after a certain level of deliverables are met in terms of their goals, in terms of what they've told us, what they would use that money for to help impact their company. And so, this is meant to be an ongoing relationship with these finalists. versus just like a one-time, one and done thing. We truly want to see them succeed and help set up the resources to get them to the next level.
This is really brilliant because I've interviewed now hundreds of really cool innovators, and they've constantly tell me what some of the lessons that they learned or the challenges they face. One, of course, was the huge thing about cash flow. It's so hard to grow a business when you're balancing all those things, and it's just the lack of support that the banks have provided. There's just more reasons not to give it than there is to give it. And it's just, they find it really hard to navigate, even throughout the government grants of all the stuff that's out there. It's just impossible to translate what all those things mean and how to do it and where to go. It's just very difficult to figure things out. So this is kind of really amazing. And the other thing they always talk about, all these innovators and entrepreneurs, it's lonely. It is such a lonely thing to be doing it and building your business, and you're supposed to have all the answers, but who do you talk to just to bounce off ideas? So this is really amazing, to have that level of support.
And you actually brought up like a really good point, and with something that that's really important to me, which is the whole financial literacy piece in all of this. You mentioned like the government grants and like how to navigate those. One of my biggest barriers for my business, and again, this is like not uncommon, is financial literacy. And I don't want to stereotype, but I hate to say this, but I feel like inherently women are not programmed, for lack of better words, to like be financially literate and like dissect the numbers of their company and dissect what they all mean and how it impacts not only their present state, but their future. And so it was a huge barrier for me, for example, even though I had a profitable company, successful growth year after year, I kept getting turned down from my banks, and it was infuriating. And so at one point, desperate to get rid of these high interest rate loans and everything, I literally stalked a man at BDC that I knew was going to be at Startup Canada. And he was like the VP of something or other. And so I was like, I am going to sit down with this guy because I know he's going to be there. I'm going to tell him my situation, that I need like 80 grand for a purchase order that I can't fulfill because I don't have the cash flow to get the inventory and whatever. So I found him, I pitched him my situation in 5 minutes, and he said, I love your story. I'm sending someone to your office next week. And so this was refreshing. This was the first time anybody in the banking industry came to me versus me going to them. And so she sat down in my office and she dissected my books, and she said, what's your equity? And I said, well, why don't you just read what my accountant put together for like my financials last year? And she said, no, but what, you tell me, what is your equity and what is it at this point, in this year, in this stage in the game? I didn't know the answer. And that might sound like the most basic question someone could ask you, but believe it or not, a lot of people would not know that answer. And so that was kind of like a reality. It was like, wow, no wonder why I've been rejected from my bank over and over and over again. I am not advocating for myself in the best way I should be, to put those bankers in a position where they can advocate for me internally and also advocate towards their underwriters, who are ultimately a huge part of that decision-making process. So this woman invested over an hour, dissected, our books and everything, the key terms of our business that were really important to understand, comes back from BDC, a week later and says, I have great news. I have a loan for you. However, I still think you should go back to your bank, present yourself in the way that we've talked about, and see what happens. And I'm going to give you a new contact, a fresh start, a new business advisor, and let me know how that goes. And I was just I was so ready to fire my bank at this point. I was not interested, but I did it. And next thing I know, literally overnight, I went from a $0 line of credit to a $50,000 line of credit. And from and then my credit card limit had increased over 100%. And so that was a very interesting, hard lesson that took me over 3 years to learn. I was not financially literate in a way to help set up my business for success long term. And so the Founders Fund is a huge part of that, by the way. When we talk about mentors and everything, a huge part of it.
No, that's brilliant because, it's funny. I'm a CPA, so understanding all those balance sheets and all the terms and equity has become natural DNA for me. However, on the flip side is because it's so natural, I think everyone knows that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, working with different clients, it really is something that no one is really schooled in understanding that and how to actually translate these metrics into actual stories of what it's actually telling what your business is going through. And there is no translator. So when you go into a bank, they're only programmed to say yes or no based on certain rules. They're not there to give you coaching or advice or real guidance.
Exactly.
That translator. So there really is a gap in that marketplace.
And all I was doing was showing up with my notice of assessments, right? And I thought, because that's what they were asking for. And I thought that would be enough. Never in a million years did I think being able to present myself in a different way while also representing like more accurate, everything from like forecasting and our goals and everything like that. Like they just didn't really ask for those things. And so I never thought to prepare myself for those. So yeah. And now I'm not even a client of BDC, but the moral of that story is like, I'm a huge brand ambassador because that taught me such a huge lesson in financial literacy. And one of your questions before I jumped on this podcast that I found interesting is you asked something like, what is, something that you wish the Canadian government or something like that could offer to entrepreneurs? And that was like my number one thing, like access to financial literacy. So programs to like teach us these things, because they're actually such an imperative like foundation to the success of a company long-term. But even in my own entrepreneurial circle, I don't know a lot of people practicing these things.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. No, it really is something that, they keep saying we want to push, entrepreneurships and startups and all these things, but they're just not giving the tools enough and the education enough to actually support it.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And you're probably familiar with the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Fund that came out from the government. Are you?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
So this came out in November, and so it was something like, I hope I'm getting the numbers right, but the government was offering $20 million to women-led companies. This was like a huge initiative, right? And of course, women like me were all over this, going through the application process, and I felt like I needed somebody to make it their full-time job because it was so intense. And then again, like it asked a lot of these numbers that at this point I had been prepared for, but I feel like the everyday business owner might not have been so prepared for. And then the result of that fund is that they thought that they were going to be able to dissect all the applications within a month. It's been over 3 months and they're still not done yet. And their notice on their website is, we've received over 3,000 applications, which far exceeded their goal. And these are people who actually successfully completed the application. This doesn't even count the people who navigated challenges and then just gave up because it was such an extensive application process. And they're literally on the website, it says something like the amount of funding greatly exceeds, or is basically the amount of applicants greatly exceeds the amount of funding available. So plain black and white, there are not enough of these programs available for women, and they're asking for them.
No, it's crazy. So here's the funny part of that story about when you're saying about 3,000 applicants. I actually started putting in an application, but honestly, it was so time consuming, so long. And I was like, honestly, I don't have enough hours in a day. So I stopped because it was such a long process. And they didn't actually, they don't tell you how much time to allocate to it. And honestly, the questions I had, they kept telling me to read the FAQs. It was like a huge book. It was like a huge manual. And I'm like, oh,
it was an online textbook. And it was like, who is supposed to be, there was no support to help guide through the application process. If this is geared towards entrepreneurs, like you can identify with this, we already have 20 hats to wear on any given day. I don't have 20 hours in a week to just put towards one application. And so like it's pretty incredible that 3,000 women were still able to successfully finish that application when I wanted to give up like 5 times, to be honest.
You're my hero for making it through, because honestly, and I actually even became aware of it because not just from the news, but a listener actually sent me a message, Karen Hayford, saying, hey, did you hear about this fund? You should totally do it. And I was like, oh, if I could just hire someone to do it for me, this would make my life easier, because it was so intensive.
It was intensive, and they're still going through the application. So kudos to all the women out there who successfully made it to the finish line, because as someone who also made it to the finish line, like it was not easy. It was grueling. And I imagine like the ratio of successful women who actually submitted the application versus the ones who are like, I don't have time for this. This is too much. I have no help, no support, no nothing. Imagine the amount of women who left money on the table because they didn't have the support to finish through something like this. Yeah,
no, seriously, it was really, really crazy. Like so I actually wanted to do it for my sister as well, because she has, and I'm just like, no, I can't even do it for myself. Like, that's right, listeners, I quit. That's right. I admit it, I failed.
Don't blame you, because I almost did like a quite a few times.
That it just totally validates me that experience. I was like, am I just reading this wrong? Like, is this really? And I couldn't get over it.
Well, and the tricky thing about anything from the government is that if you don't check all the boxes, you're just giving them the green light to say next.
Yeah.
You didn't check all the boxes. Like, even though you might forgot to leave out one sentence that we told you to identify in your application, you just gave us an easy way to weed you out of that pile. So it's a very intense application process.
So this is great because that means your Founders Fund application process is probably really super simple based on this lesson. Aha!
Absolutely. It's basically a few questions in a form. And then obviously being like the financial literacy piece is so important to us, we've actually created a spreadsheet template for our applicants to fill out in terms of what their historical numbers were, what their present numbers are, and where they think they're going. Laid it out super simple, so it's all, plug and play basically.
I love that. I love that. This is amazing. And plus the mentorship piece, like I love that you're, regardless if you make it through or not or whatever, you get that mentorship piece. Like that is so huge.
Definitely. And it's the thing that I think is undervalued here. Like, it's easy to look at the money and say, hey, free money. But like the mentorship, I truly feel anyway, is really the value prop here. And we're giving not only every applicant, like I said, access to mentorship, but we're giving feedback on every single application as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Because so it doesn't just go into a black cloud and no one understands why, what we could have done better. Like, no one ever tells us what we could have done better.
So true.
I love this. I think this is amazing. So out of curiosity, I got to ask this question. Do you have a favorite type of tea?
I get asked this a lot, and it's like asking to choose my favorite child. It's so hard. Honestly, similar to like the mandate of Tease Tea, like it depends on how I feel some days. Again, like I'm all about self-prescribing tea based on my mood or goal that day. However, I will say if I had to choose a favorite, I love matcha green tea. Are you familiar with matcha?
I've heard of it, but I haven't actually tried enough of it.
So it sounds like inappropriate, but I'm just going to come out and say this, but matcha is like the cocaine of green tea. It is just it is incredible. It is, imagine, so basically what it is, you're taking your regular green tea leaves, and then what's happening is the stems are removed and it's pulverized into this beautiful concentrated like neon green powder that's a reflection of the quality of the processing in the first place. And because you're taking that powder and you're dissolving it in warm water instead of steeping your tea, you're consuming the leaves whole, right? Instead of taking the tea leaves out. And so because of that, one serving of matcha is the equivalent of consuming up to 10 cups of green tea.
That is crazy. I absolutely, and then you've got like great like titles to things like Breakfast at Tiffany, and that's so creative. Some of your tea names.
Thank you. Well, and that was like a big part of like our differentiator. Like we talk about empowering women, but at the end of the day, we're still a tea company, and there are so many tea companies doing what they do well, and a lot of them focus on celebrating like the history of tea or like the region of where it comes from, or, it's like this beautiful, like there's these visions of beautiful fields of tea leaves, and that's all great, but there's a lot of that. And so for us, we're more about a playful, modern, friendly approach to tea. We like to think like we take our goals seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously as, for our customers and the people behind Tease.
Because I was laughing at some of the things because I was like, I'm going to shop. And I'm like, it says by type or by desire. And I'm like, what is my desire? So I'm like, there's PMS relief, there's sleep, hangover help. I mean, that must be a real big seller.
It tastes like a Caesar.
Immunity, mother. I was just like, this is so cool how it's like a very different type of experience.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that because only in the last year have I gotten help internally with like our branding and everything. And to date, before that, it's just been a learning, long, grinding journey to like refine our brand, like by myself.
So when you do get some free time, is there some type of activity or, a guilty pleasure that you're like, thank goodness I have this?
So before, it used to be like Netflix and binge, like and I know that's not like a sexy hobby to have by any means, but like I often would require just something to shut off my brain. I have a very overactive brain, and obviously I think a lot of entrepreneurs can identify with that. Now my time is limited because I have a 1-year-old. So in my free time, I'm playing with her and I'm just like so happy. Like that's pretty much my free time, my hobbies. I just play with her, love to find new experiences to do together, even if it's as simple as like taking her shopping or taking her on a stroll down the street. Like that's my free time right now.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I don't know how you manage it all. You've got a thriving company. You've got this fund, this mentorship, children. It's amazing. You're definitely an inspiration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I don't know how I'm doing it either, but the biggest thing I've learned is to start trusting other people to help do things with my company that can probably do them better than me. And so delegation didn't come easy for a few years, but it's definitely become a lot easier out of necessity at this point.
Oh, see, that's always what happens, right? It's kind of, it forces you to change. You're like, I either have to do it or not.
Exactly.
This is amazing. So I know our listeners are going to be dying to figure out how they can connect with you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So if they want to connect directly, they can find me on Instagram. I'm much more active on Instagram than my email some days. So it's Sheena_Brady. And on my profile, I like to talk about and celebrate everything from my entrepreneurial journey to, nerding out on tea and family life and everything in between. So.
I love it. And for people that are interested in this fund, the applications open April 9th, I believe.
Yes. So April 9th, and they close May 3rd. Sorry, I keep mixing up those dates. So April 9th to May 3rd. And if they want to learn more about that, they can go to the Tease Tea Founders Fund.com, and they can sign up for our applicant waitlist, or they can just go ahead and fill out the application when they open on Tuesday.
Oh, this is amazing. I know tons of innovators out there that are going to be dying for this fund. So yes, this is amazing. Congratulations. And it's honestly been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure's been mine. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining in and tuning in this week. Next week, you got another really cool episode. Hope you enjoyed the sneak peek. I'm going to try to do this and see how this works. If you guys are interested, like the little sneak teasers, let me know. I'd love to hear back from all of you. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. And let me know if you know of another Canadian innovator that's doing something really cool around the world. Let's get them showcased. Or if there's an innovation trend that you would like to specifically focus on. Anyways, looking forward to hearing from all of you and talk to you next week. Cheers.